You just press the button.
I think it's kind of a no-brainer.
This is a real button.
Come with me where moonbirds hits the sky. And then you'll walk with me along the by on by on by. Okay, all together now. My little buttercup. My little buttercup has the sweetest smile. My little buttercup, won't you stay a while? Won't you stay a while? Moonbeams meet the sky, and you and I will walk the by on by. Well, this is really winning. Thank you.
But the first question for both of you, what do you admire about each other?
I'll do it first. So Elon knows this, but the advantage of being his younger brother is I kind of used to get what he wanted, and he wanted a lot of stuff. And so the one time I remember he wanted motorbikes. I was too young. Well, he was 7, I think, and I was 6 or something like that, which in this country is not very common to get motorbikes. But one of the great things I admire about Elon is when he wants something, he really wants it, and he goes and gets it. And it's amazing to watch him do that as his brother, and he's done it throughout his life.
Interesting.
Well, I think Kimball is just one of the nicest people I know in the world. I've never in all my life seen Kimball intentionally do a mean thing. So I admire that a great deal.
The two of you, as I understand it, I mean, entrepreneurs are interesting because they often get started at a young age doing entrepreneurial ventures of some kind. And I understand that when you were still in South Africa, you had a venture of some kind.
Yeah, the video arcade.
Yeah. Yeah, we had this brilliant idea to start a video arcade because we really knew what games were popular.
Yeah. And also we were video game experts at 14 and 15. And the reason we had to stop was because we went to the city to get a code variance, and you need to be 18 to sign, and we had never told our parents. And we already had a lease, we had games coming, and when the parents found out, they put a stop to it, which is a real bummer because it would have been very successful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that wasn't the final barrier to success. But that was the first time that you worked together as brothers. And eventually that led to a company called Zip2. Right. I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking about Zip2. How did it come about? What was the idea? What was the whole process like for you?
Sure. Well, and Kimball, do you want to start off, or should it?
Well, I mean, I would start with the road trip.
The road trip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a year before, this is '94. Elon was working at some video game company there's a theme here.
What? Yeah. I was actually working, I was doing 2 jobs. One was at a video game company that was ironically called Rocket Science. And then working on ultra capacitors during the day for electric cars.
And so we went on a road trip from Silicon Valley to Philadelphia, and it was in '94, and we were both, I'm younger than Elon, but we were both finishing school at the same time, because I'm much smarter than him. Elon actually was doing a double major, so that's why. But anyway, so we ended up doing that, and we started with a network medical database. Remember that?
Yeah, well, there were a bunch of iterations,
Yeah.
but I think the thought in '95 was that the internet was going to be something really that fundamentally changed humanity. It was like humanity acquiring a nervous system. You know, previously people would communicate information almost by osmosis relative to how the internet works. You know, if you wanted to have access to a lot of information, like you'd go to like the Library of Congress, but unless you were physically where the books were, you didn't have access to that information. But with the internet, you could be anywhere in the world, and if you're connected to the internet, you have access to all the world's information. So it was really just like humanity was almost becoming like a superorganism with a nervous system. So we want to be part of, you know, building some elements of that. And
It was a funny time because it made so much sense to us, but we literally had a guy throw a Yellow Pages book at us. He was a very senior executive, and tell us, do you ever really think the internet is going to replace this?
yeah,
And literally, and you're kind of looking at them going, this guy's screwed.
yeah, yeah. He didn't, and people didn't know what the internet was,
Yeah.
Including in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was like something that universities and like the government used, and nobody was really doing anything on it, and you certainly couldn't make money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Did you know that you were onto something right away, or did people just think you were crazy and pursuing some bizarre dream? When did it occur to you that Zip2 might be a success?
Well, I mean, when we first started out, I think our ambitions were really quite low. It was really to make enough money to pay the rent.
Yeah. We got a VC give us money. That was, yay!
Yeah.
We thought it was all over then.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, when we started out in '95, we literally, at the beginning, we had one computer, which would be the web server during the day, and then at night, I'd program on it.
And we'd sleep in the office.
Yeah,
we couldn't afford to have an apartment.
It was cheaper to rent the office than to rent an apartment, so we just rented the office and slept in the office and showered at the YMCA.
Showered at the YMCA. And
Yeah.
for me, the worst part was eating at Jack in the Box 3 times a day.
Yeah, man, this like
I'll sleep
it's
in an
really
office
difficult to
anything.
get food at Palo Alto after like 10 p.m. It's like Jack in the Box and a few other options. So we rotated through the Jack in the Box menu.
I remember the one time I was literally at Jack in the Box. Hopefully you guys aren't, whoever's from the company's not here. And it was one of those like 3 a.m. things, and I took a milkshake, and I was so tired, and there was something in the milkshake, and I literally went like this.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your standards just dropped to nothing.
Yeah, so yeah, we're through the end of '95, where that's essentially we're just sleeping in the office and showering at the YMCA, and then around the end of '95 is when Netscape went public, and then whether or not somebody knew what the internet was, they knew that you could make money on the internet somehow, or even if it's only on the greater fool theory. So when we went and talked to venture capitalists in early '96, there was a much greater interest in what we were doing. In fact, the round closed in like maybe a week or something.
It was crazy. Yeah, we went from sleeping in the office to people throwing. I mean, again, this is a financial crowd, so you guys see these numbers every day. But for us to hear, we'll give you $3 million.
Yeah, that sounded extremely. We thought they were crazy. Like, why would they do that?
It was literally like, these people are insane.
They obviously do not realize we're sleeping in the office.
In fact, when they did fund us,
Yeah.
they realized that we were illegal immigrants.
Well, I mean,
Yes, we were.
I'd say it's a gray area.
Yeah, yes, we were. We were illegal immigrants. We were sleeping in the office. We didn't have a car. We had one car, but the wheel kept falling off.
But, well, actually, yeah, the wheel did actually fall off the car.
Yes, exactly. And the venture capitalists actually bought us cars.
Yeah, well, they gave us 40 grand.
It was 40 grand to go buy cars, which was, at the time was more money than we'd ever seen.
Yeah, and I bought I spent $35K on a Series 1 67 Jaguar E-Type.
Which didn't drive. But he got what he wanted.
Yeah, it looked really great by the side of the road.
he got it. He was driving it home from the dealer, and it broke down, and he had to actually come to the house on a flatbed truck.
Right. It didn't improve from there. I mean, it was really brutal.
Should have kept the truck.
Yeah.
It reminds me in some ways of, eBay went public in 1998, and we had kind of the scrappy startup mentality as well. And the first time I ever saw Elon on TV was when you took delivery of a McLaren supercar.
That's right. Yeah. Right.
So presumably somewhere between sleeping on the floor of the office and the McLaren, something happened.
So at Zip2, we basically created software to help bring the media companies online. So it was sort of internet publishing software. It was the yellow pages, white pages, maps and directions, that kind of thing. And we helped bring some of the major media companies online, or at least a portion of what their online presence was. And so we had as customers and investors New York Times Company, Knight Ridder, Hearst, and most of the major media companies. And then
in fact, the guy that threw the telephone book at us eventually became an investor.
Yeah.
Right. And then the company sold to Compaq for a little over $300 million.
Yeah.
Circa 1999, late 90s.
Yeah, that's right. It was, the deal was sort of struck late 98 and it concluded early 99.
Yeah. And so then what happens to you guys? I mean, at that point, you're 23, 24 years old, give or take, and you've gone from being barely able to pay the rent to having substantial resources. How did that influence your paths in what you did next?
The way I like to think about it is I was like a dog in a cage getting beaten for 4 years, and then they let me out and here are all the T-bones you can eat. So it was a very weird experience, actually, because you don't think, I thought I was building that company for life, and then, boom, they give you lots and lots of money in easy-to-carry bags, and you can leave. It was totally surreal.
And what did you do?
So I went to New York. So I was done with Silicon Valley. I think technology is my brother's thing. He loves it, and I enjoy it too. But honestly, for me, food is what I've always been passionate since I was a kid. I was the cook in the family. And
it's ironic. He's much thinner than I am.
It's true. I can eat anything. Although I'm finding out as you get older, it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
But no. So I went to New York and I learned to cook. I went to the. I was young, and I figured, what else do you do when you have enough financial resources to do whatever you want? And I always wanted to learn to cook, so I enrolled in a cooking school, one of the top schools in the country in New York City, and had this incredible experience of cooking with some of the best, most talented chefs in the world. And it was a unique circumstance for me personally because I was there in New York during 9/11, and I graduated from cooking school just before 9/11, and I lived right by the World Trade Center, so I saw everything happen. It was a very big event in my life. But what the rare opportunity it gave me was the opportunity to cook for the firefighters. So I spent 6 weeks at Ground Zero cooking for the firefighters, and that's when I I always loved food, but my passion for community and connecting people to each other through food was just I literally couldn't even describe how incredible this experience was. And so I came out of that with a very strong intention to start a restaurant. And having been part of a company that just sold for $300 million and investing in PayPal, which at the time was worth billions of dollars, doing a restaurant was a weird decision, but for me it was the right decision.
So for you, it unlocked a path to dreams that maybe you had beforehand, or just opportunistically you just said, this is what I want to do, and you still not only run the restaurant you began, but there's more to it.
Yeah, well, do you mean the nonprofit, or do you mean?
No, I mean just in terms of there are more than one restaurant.
Oh yeah, sure. So turns out I'm actually pretty good at cooking. I didn't really know I was good at cooking, but when I opened the restaurant I had two partners, Hugo and Jen, opened the restaurant. We were supposed to do 60 people a night, And it was just going to be this side project for me because I was still involved in Elon's companies, Tesla and SpaceX. And today we serve 10,000 people a week. And it's just continues to grow.
Elon, for you, Zip2 happened, you sold it, and
and bought the McLaren, yeah.
and if I'm not mistaken, you invested most of that money into your next venture, X.com.
That's right. Most of the funds went into X.com, which was later renamed PayPal, and that worked out pretty well.
It worked out pretty well, but looking back on it, because you put a lot of your eggs in that basket, would you advise entrepreneurs to roll the bones quite the way you did?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I think it's worth investing your own capital in what you do. I don't believe in the sort of other people's money thing. I think if you're not willing to put your own assets at stake, then you shouldn't ask other people to do that.
So eBay comes along, buys PayPal, and then I remember 2003, give or take, meeting Elon at a coffee shop in Palo Alto. This was not long after the PayPal deal had closed. And I said to Elon, what would you like to do next? And you had 3 things to say.
Right.
Do you remember what they were?
Well, yeah. But yeah, they're basically, space, solar, and electric cars.
Space, solar, and electric cars, yes, 2 points.
But yeah.
Wait, space, electric cars, what was the middle one?
I asked Elon what he wanted to do, and he said he wanted to do something in solar power. He wanted to colonize Mars eventually, but to get there by building a rocket business, a sustainable business, and building electric cars. And let's talk a little bit about Mars.
Okay.
So where did this come from? When did you have that dream? How did that come to be?
I guess when I was in college, I thought about things that would most affect the future of humanity, and there were 3 areas that I thought would have the biggest impact, and those were the internet, sustainable energy, of which solar power is the production side, and electric cars are the consumption side, and then humanity becoming a multi-planet species. And I think our future will fundamentally bifurcate to one where we're a space-faring civilization, or one where we are confined to Earth until some eventual extinction event. Although I'm quite optimistic about life on Earth, I should point out. Sometimes people think that by that I expect some imminent catastrophe, but I think that the probable outcome for civilization on Earth is quite good for a long time. But I still think that we should try to extend life beyond Earth and and the thing to do is to establish a base on Mars and try to make that a self-sustaining base as soon as possible. I don't expect that SpaceX is going to do that sort of single-handedly, but I think we're going to try to advance the technology of space travel to the point where we can at least send some number of people to Mars, which is not currently possible.
As I recall, when
follow-up question, Jeff.
when SpaceX started, I think the first 3 rocket launches weren't successful.
Yeah.
And the 4th one was. What would have happened if the 4th one hadn't worked?
We would have failed. Yeah.
But let's talk about one of the failures were spectacular. I would go out to the island, the Kwajalein with Elon, and seeing giant exploding rockets is quite an amazing sight. I was one of the early investors in SpaceX, and I said, you know what? If all I get to do is to see these rockets explode, well worth every dime I put into this company.
There's something to be said about brotherly support.
But it was an amazing thing to watch what Elon had built with those rockets on a shoestring in the middle of nowhere, and literally the middle of the Pacific, 2,000 miles from Hawaii. That experience, we'd fly in these what are they called? What are those
The Hueys?
helicopters? The Hueys. You're flying the Hueys. You feel like you're right out of Apocalypse Now, flying to Dr. Evil's island. Really amazing. And again, worth every penny. Still to this day, I'd say. So I think the failures were actually unbelievably exciting to be part of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Elon.
You're welcome.
The point being that these ventures now seem to have wonderful momentum and things are going well. But I remember well there was a point in time when each of them had their tipping point and could have gone either way. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the origins of Tesla.
Sure. So with as mentioned, I was quite interested in electric cars from when I was doing my undergrad physics. And in fact, I originally came out to California to do a PhD at Stanford in applied physics and material science to work on ultracapacitors in electric cars. So it was a long-standing interest of mine, and the internet kind of put that on hold for a few years. But then after PayPal, I decided I wanted to get back into electric vehicles and make something happen in that arena, particularly since GM had come out with the EV1, and I thought, okay, well, there's not really a need for a startup company to develop electric cars because obviously GM is going to create the EV2 and the EV3. That's a logical sequence, and it will get increasingly get better and better with each iteration. And so not really need for a new company in that arena. But actually what happened was that after California changed the regulations to no longer require electric cars, GM recalled all the EV1s, and then just to make sure that nobody could get them back, they crushed them in a lot somewhere. And in fact, while they were being crushed, the people who'd been the EV1 owners who did not want those cars recalled actually held a candlelit vigil as though somebody was getting executed, basically. And it's like, that just seemed extremely crazy that GM would ignore this because it's quite rare for people to hold a candlelit vigil about a product. And particularly a GM product. So, so if people are doing that, you should really pay attention. But they wanted to just sort of erase all that, and so I thought, okay, well, we've got to try to create an electric car company. But it wasn't as though in creating these companies that we thought that we would be successful. I thought that the most likely outcome was failure. But it was still worth doing, even though the odds of success were low. In fact, even for SpaceX, originally what I started doing was not creating a rocket company, but actually was going to do a small mission to Mars, which was just a philanthropic mission where you would send a small greenhouse with seeds and dehydrated gel, and would, upon landing, hydrate the gel, and you'd have this cool picture of green plants on a red background. And the public tends to respond to precedents and superlatives. So this would be the first life on Mars, furthest that life's ever traveled, and you'd have this great money shot of green plants on a red background. So I thought that would get people's attention. So. But the expectation for that was no return. So I thought we wouldn't get any, we'd just spend the money on that and it wouldn't happen. And it was in the process of trying to do that mission that I concluded that I'd made a mistake with respect to my assumptions about why are there no people on Mars. Because I started off thinking that it was because there was a lack of will. And that if you could reignite the will, then it would happen. So my initial thing even with the space side was really to get the public excited and to get people to essentially vote NASA to have a bigger budget. That was my goal initially. But as I tried to do that mission, I was able to compress the costs of the satellite or the spacecraft and the greenhouse and everything and the communication costs, but I wasn't able to compress the rocket costs. And I actually tried, had some adventures along the way trying to get a good deal on rockets. I actually flew to Russia 3 times to try to buy some ICBMs. And I negotiated a deal too, actually. But after the third trip to Russia, which was very, very strange because I was like there in 2001, 2002, and I thought, well, if we do this, well, it's going to generate a lot of interest, but if there's still a fundamental technology issue with rocket transport, then it's not going to solve the problem. So I decided that it was not a question of will, it was a question of way. And if people thought there was a way to do it without it fundamentally affecting their standard of living, then they would support such an endeavor, particularly in the United States, which the United States is a nation of explorers. I mean, it's a distillation of the human spirit of exploration. People came here from other places, and so I think that exploratory spirit is actually very strong. But people need to know that it's possible. This can be done without materially affecting their standard of living. So.
I mean, what you've accomplished is amazing. Between linking up with the space station on launches and the Model S winning Car of the Year and being just a phenomenon. But a good, yes. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing, and we'll come back and talk about Solar City in a second. But you mentioned gardens, and I think that's a natural segue. We're surrounded by some beautiful gardens here on stage. And Kimball, I wonder if you might want to talk a little bit about these.
Sure. So the restaurants that we do in Colorado are, before farm to table was a term, we work with local farmers and bring local food to the tables, and we really consider ourselves a community restaurant. And one of the things we did as part of the community was to reach out to kids in the community in schools and get them connected to food through school gardens. And we'd bring them into the restaurant, and we do everything from give them chicken liver pate without telling them what it was, and they would thoroughly enjoy it, and then you tell them, then they spit it out of their mouth. And it's like fun things like that we just did as a great way to connect into the community. And then I had a personal accident, a very severe accident. I was paralyzed on my left and horizontal for 2 months after breaking my neck. And it really helped me focus on, well, let me go back to having more of an impact on society. And I know there's a lot of philanthropists in the crowd, and I have a lot of respect for that. But for me, it was very much about how can I give back, but in a way that really I understood and could really see the impact. And I'd been working with these school gardens for many years, and so I came up with this idea called the Learning Garden, which you see beautifully presented. Thank you very much, Nancy, for doing this. And what we do is, it's a nonprofit. We go to schools around the country, and we install these outdoor learning environments that are school gardens. And they're very different to traditional school gardens. Traditional school gardens being in the corner of the schoolyard with a fence around it. These are designed to be in the schoolyard, on the playground, where the kids will see it every day. Hundreds of kids will enjoy it and play with it every day. And it's made out of the same material as playground equipment, so it'll last for decades, unlike traditional school gardens, which are very, very temporary. We also came up with this idea to make it more modular so that you could fit it in any schoolyard. Rooftops, asphalt. There's a lot of toxic soil, sadly, in our cities where you literally couldn't put a garden there if you wanted to. And these were designed to be FDA approved just for food, for growing food. And so what I did was really look at the problem based on the experience that I had working with Elon and working in whether it's manufacturing or operations or politics, frankly, which is a very big political problem. And what value could I add? And there are lots of great gardeners out there, and I'll be the first to tell you I'm not a gardener. But I really believed in the impact that these were having, and the data is amazing. I mean, we see a doubling of vegetable intake when kids have a learning garden on their schoolyard, literally a doubling from 2.5 to 5 portions a day. We see test scores, particularly in science, go up by 15 points on a 100-point scale when they get taught the same science lesson in the learning garden versus in the classroom. This incredible impact on their lives. And the challenge was not a question of school gardens. That had already been proven. The challenge was, how do you scale? How do you get something that will reach 100,000 schools within a few years? Because that's the problem we have. Childhood obesity is today's problem. It is not tomorrow's problem. 20% of underserved kids are going into kindergarten obese. It's an awful tragedy. We have these poor children that are not only obese, but they're actually starving because the food we're giving them has no nutrients. It has calories, but no nutrients. And it's just this awful, awful situation, a real tragedy that we're creating. And so for me, what I wanted to do was, how do I come in and say, okay, I know what I know what I think I can do well. Let me see what I can create that could actually go into 100,000 schools within a few years. And so I created the Learning Garden with this idea to, by the end of this decade, to reach every child that wants one, or every school that wants one. And we have the capacity. Now what we need is the political will to go do it. And so we'll have about 200 installed this year. And we started 2 years ago, and we did one 2 years ago. We did 50 last year. We'll do about 200 this year. Hopefully 1,000 next year, and then many thousands after that.
Kimball, if people are interested in finding more out about the learning gardens, where would they go?
Thekitchencommunity.org. Please go. If you're a superintendent, and I know there's some superintendents in this room, because I had some heated conversations with you guys earlier, please go learn about it, because there's no better way to teach kids about science, which we all understand is a massive problem in this country. Getting our kids to love science is so important, and childhood obesity is so important. We need to fix this problem. We are creating expensive, unproductive people. Let's just stop that. Let's fix the problem. Let's fix it now.
Absolutely. I think we'll talk a little bit about Solar City, yeah, and then maybe open up to questions from the audience. Solar City, I mean, your family is remarkable. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about how Solar City got going and your role as chairman and
sure.
all that.
So, well, so Solar City was founded by two cousins of ours, Lyndon and Peter Rive, who are really great guys. And before Solar City, they did a company called Everdream, which did large-scale management of computers and other assets, electronic assets, which was sold to Dell, and that did pretty well. So, and the genesis of Solar City was actually, you know, we were Burning Man with our cousins, and they were thinking about what to do next, and I said, well, I think there's a real need for great entrepreneurs in the solar industry, and I said if they were willing to start a solar power company, then I would completely back them on that. So they took me up on the offer and created Solar City, which what Solar City is essentially is a giant distributed utility. Or I'd say right now it's a small distributed utility, but it will be hopefully a giant distributed utility. And it's obviously one that's based on the sun, that giant fusion reactor in the sky. So it's something that'll last for a very long time. I ultimately think that we will generate more energy from solar power than from any other source. In fact, it's worth noting that the planet is already almost entirely solar powered, in that we would be a frozen ice ball at 3 Kelvin if not for the sun, and the sun powers our whole system of precipitation and the ecosystem. So really we're just talking about a little bit of extra power that humanity uses to run civilization, essentially, but it's really quite a small amount relative to the amount that actually hits the Earth.
Right, and Solar City went public a few months back.
Yeah, it went public in December. It was quite a difficult IPO, and we were able to get it through. and now it's doing reasonably well.
Well, there are amazing successes on both your parts. We're going to go to questions from the audience, assuming these monitors work. As of the moment, they're not, and if not, then I will. Oh, I see a monitor coming on here. All right. What are the key traits, skills, or circumstances that have allowed you to be so successful?
I don't know. Why don't you answer for me, or do you? What
Yeah,
do you think?
I'll go
answer
first.
for you.
That's a great idea.
So I live in a small town in Colorado called Boulder, and my joke is I grew up in South Africa during the collapse of apartheid, very, very difficult time. Then I went to California during the rise of the internet, exciting but difficult time. Then I was in New York City during 9/11, difficult time. Now I'm in this little small town in Boulder, waiting for some serious shit to go down. So I think those had very big impacts on me, and I think the impact personally is constant paranoia, I guess. Maybe it's better. I hate to say that, not in a negative way, but it's you're just kind of, you're waiting for something really intense to happen all the time. So I think that just keeps you on your toes and keeps you moving forward.
It does.
Yeah, I think just obviously being tenacious and being well. I think just being super focused on the truth is extremely important, and looking for feedback from all sources. I think those are really key.
Yeah. I'd also add, knowing both of you, is that you're very detail-oriented. There's no small part of the experience that doesn't get attention from you. Another question that I had, Elon, you've been compared to Henry Ford, Richard Branson, Steve Jobs. Who do you compare yourself to?
I don't really compare myself to anyone. I mean, it's not. There's certain people that I admire from history that I think are great. Certainly many of the scientists and engineers and literary figures and so forth. I'm a big fan of Ben Franklin. Who's a scientist and sort of thinker, and he was the kind of guy who did what needed to be done. So guys like that, I wouldn't say I compare myself in any way, but I certainly admire them.
Are there people you look up to?
I think the two that I look up to, in my way I look, the same thing as Elon, is kind of look back. I love Winston Churchill.
Yeah, he's cool.
He's that guy, I think, was one of the greatest gifts to mankind. And I think Steve Jobs.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the thing that makes me like these people is that they put their passion into their work, and it's not about the job. It's not about coming to work. It's about making a difference in your society. And I think that's what I've always admired with my brother and with anyone else.
One thing I've observed from my own entrepreneurial history is that people that start out building a company to make a lot of money almost invariably fail. It's people that start out with a dream or something that they're passionate about and they care about, and the money just kind of comes as
I think if you think about it, you can get money both ways. But if we have a mutual friend of ours, Bill Lee, who has this phrase that starting a business from scratch is like chewing glass and looking into the abyss. It is really, really hard. And if you don't like your glass sandwich, you're going to have a miserable, miserable life. And so it's a very important lesson. Do what you're passionate about, because no matter what you do, if it's making a difference, it's super hard to do it. And so you better be passionate about it.
Let's see if we have any other questions from the audience. Yeah. Next question, please. For Kimball, what role and impact do you see impact investing in social ventures having in solving the world's major problems?
So I actually get this question asked to me a lot. I was literally had this conversation with a major social investor a week ago. I really struggle with it, to be honest. I think the idea of obviously investing as a philanthropist, I love. I think that's really great. But if you're looking for a financial return, it is super hard to not have that as your key driver. I get the idea of double bottom line or triple bottom line, and I live that life all day long, but it's a personal decision of mine. And I really do struggle with the right answer, because the more money you make, the more difference you can make in philanthropy, and you can separate the two, and you can be quite impactful as a philanthropist. If you're a financier on Wall Street, you can choose to, I mean, I'm sure once you reach a certain point, everything you do will be for philanthropy after that, and that makes a big difference in the world. If you chose to invest in social ventures and get a smaller return, I think you struggle. Success is very important. And so I really believe in isolating the problem, focus on success, getting it done. And in the case of investing, that means focusing on investing and getting the highest possible return within reason, human rights and all that stuff. But social investing, I think, is a very difficult space to make work. And actually, maybe, Jeff, you should answer that question, because you do that all the time.
Yeah, except I'm sitting in this chair. Well, I agree with you. I think social investing has all the rigor and challenges of for-profit investing, but added into that is the qualitative, sometimes unmeasurable aspects of dealing with some sort of social change or social good. So
one of the things on the nonprofit side, I was specifically referring to for-profit social ventures, but on the nonprofit side, I get really frustrated because there is no measuring stick. It's, how are you doing? You get to measure yourself. That's retarded. You need to have some measuring, some common grounded measuring stick. And in the for-profit world, you've got profit. And in the nonprofit world, it's very weird. It's my first nonprofit, so I'm learning as I go. I don't know what the answer is.
Elon, anything to add on that?
But I think generally anything that if it's possible to solve a problem with a profitable venture, then that's the best thing to do. So it's only when there's some failure in the market, and there are some, but there actually aren't that many, but in the grand scheme of things, there are some failures in the market that have to be addressed with a nonprofit. But generally, I'd say, or on the side of I do have a small foundation.
No.
So it's not as though I'm against giving stuff. I do.
Elon's the biggest donor to the nonprofit side.
Generally, if there's a way to fix the market system, that's the better way to do it. But sometimes there isn't, or there are complications in doing it.
How is the Elon of 2013 different from the Elon of the Zip2 days? What have you learned?
We've learned, I think, quite a lot. A lot of Scotch history between then and now. I think I've mentioned this at when I gave my talk at South by Southwest, but I think I've made several hiring decisions in the past where I valued intellect over heart, and I think that was a mistake. And so I've tried to adjust accordingly. It actually matters whether somebody's a good person beyond just goodness itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Kimball, same question. The Kimball of 2013. How are you different from the Zip2 days?
Yeah, as Elon said, that is a long time ago. I would say I'm much more comfortable with myself. I'm much more able to say no. So if there's an opportunity in front of me that is very financially attractive or whatever, and it's not what I want to do, I know to say no. And in the past, I would always say yes, and I would get involved in things that weren't what I was passionate about. So I think that's probably the most valuable thing I've learned. I think I still have a lot to learn. So that's.
I think we have time for one last question we got anything? Please wrap up. In that case, my last question is: Are you guys going to go to Mars together?
We might.
I think I mean, when we're 95, what the hell else are we going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that'll be fun. I don't think I would want to go before that, but.
Well, Elon has a famous line about going to Mars.
Right.
Would you mind repeating it?
Okay. I mean, so yeah. I mean, I think I would like to die on Mars, but just not on impact.
All right. I think on that note, I'd like to thank Elon and Kimball for a wonderful panel. And
Thank you.
Thank you to the Milken Show.
Pretty extraordinary. Let's have it one more time for Ilana and Kimball and Jeff. Thank you.